Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show, and we do it every Monday through Friday. My name is Brad. Jon Patterson, good morning to you.
Good morning, Brad.
I say his name in full because that's also the address of his website, Jon Patterson, C-O-M-B-E-S-T, JonPatterson.com. What does John do? Every day of his life for 23 years, never missed one single day, puts together a list of all the important stuff that's going on in the state of Missouri you should know about. Sort of like the ultimate freedom of information, sunshine law on the web. How's that, John?
Hey, that works for me, Brad.
And all you have to do is go to his site. Once again, nothing fancy. He has links of all these things. They'll take you to various websites around the state of Missouri. Some of them are government websites. Some of them are actually
Never government, Brad. I've never linked to a government website, but thank you for that plug, though.
Really? You never lived?
Yeah, Brad. I don't link to. I can't think of a scenario in which I'd link to a government website. But I appreciate the intro.
What if the governor of the state of Missouri? What's his name again?
His name is Jon Ashcroft. It's right here in 1988. Brad.
Jon Ashcroft, the guy who put the top on the nude woman in the Department of Justice to cover up her boobs. Remember that, John?
Yeah, I do, Brad. It was a sad moment for all of us who love statue breasts. If you're really into statue breasts, you say, Governor Ashcroft, thanks for the memories, but uncover them.
Okay, so
Brad, I don't want to take this into my own hands. Go ahead, Brad.
If Mike Kehoe said, John, if you put a link to the state of Missouri website, I'll give you $1 million. Would you do it, John?
He doesn't have my number. That's inconsequential, Brad. It can't happen. I'm not going to give the governor my number.
Anyway, John puts together this incredible website that you should know about, that you should check out. It'll keep you informed about the comings and goings around the state of Missouri, all the interesting stuff. Now, what we do is, every morning we start the show off with this guy.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he counts them down. And we start off with...
In third place...
Brad, since you started the show talking about breasts, I'm going to try to bring this to something serious, okay? And that topic is... using a bingo spinner to decide what bills a committee will hear. Did you happen to catch wind of this fun story, Brad?
No, I did not. Is it for real?
Yeah, it is for real. And Brad, this is something you would categorize maybe in C Block as a crazy, weird story, but it's a fun story from the state capitol. And it's a little convoluted when we start thinking about different rules committees and processes by which they pass bills from committee and review Senate bills and review House bills and send them on. But in short, a gentleman named Scott Cupps is chairman of a House Rules Committee. Now, if you recognize the name Scott Cupps, Brad, that's because we talked about him a few weeks ago. And he was the gentleman that wasn't crazy about not getting a key assignment from the speaker. So he decided to name a bunch of stuff after the gentleman that did get that designation. Do you remember the Bishop Davidson story, Brad?
I do remember that.
So, yeah, Scott Cupps filed some bills that would rename, for example, everything like the Katy Trail would now be called the Bishop Davidson Trail. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education would, I believe, be called the Bishop Davidson, something like School of Propaganda or something like that, or Indoctrination. So you could tell that Scott Cupps has a good sense of humor. But he's chairman of a committee, and one of the things that the committee does is when bills are passed, this committee checks it. Like, it makes sure that everything in the bill is relevant to actually the bill title. It makes sure that everything in the bill is kosher before it goes on for what would eventually be final votes. Now, Cupps wasn't happy that his committee wasn't getting assigned a lot of bills, a lot of important Senate bills. And we can assume here, Brad, my assumption here is that he wasn't quite happy with the speaker, once again, and he wasn't quite happy with the bills that he was getting. So Cupps decided that instead of just taking 20 bills that were on the agenda for the committee, they were only going to pass out 5 at a time. And for every Senate bill that his committee got to review, he would pass 5 bills out. In other words, Brad, give us some important stuff to do, or we're not just going to be a rubber stamp for legislation. That's the way I read the story, Brad. So in order to pick this most fairly, Representative Cupps showed up at the House committee hearing last week, and he had a bingo spinner. Like when you go to bingo and they put the balls in, Brad, it's kind of reminiscent of almost kind of like what a smaller version of what you would see on an old Missouri lottery drawing. Remember those spinners, Brad?
Oh, yeah. Matter of fact, they used to do remember the thing up in, if you remember way back when they did the Powerball, they did it up in Iowa, believe it or not.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that story where they would videotape it. So I'll get to the point. Scott Cupps hilariously wore a jacket that was spun by his grandma's old quilt club, put together, I would just call it a unique jacket to wear to signify that he was the chairman of the committee. And then he brought a bingo spinner, and he said he secured it from the nuns at St. Mary's Hospital in Jefferson City. So Cupps went through the process, and he pulled some balls out, and he gave the members of the committee a bingo card. And then the ones that he was able to pull out, those would be the bills that would be discussed and passed. So I should point out that the best summary of this came from Jason Hancock of the progressive blog Missouri Independent. The headline is, Missouri lawmaker used a bingo spinner to prove a point. His colleagues didn't love it. Later in the story, there's a quote from Carrie Engel, and she says, "It's infrequent that I see something in this building that surprises me. And yesterday was rather surprising." So I think it's a little bit of fun. I think that Cupps clearly likes to use the legislative process to prove a point and not take himself too seriously. And Democrats might not like it, but, you know, I hold on a second. I'll interrupt myself. That might be unfair to say Democrats didn't like it, because if you actually watch the video, and on Saturday I linked to a clip that had been posted by Camelia Peterson, friend of the show, you could see that Democrats seem to enjoy it. They seem to laugh. They seem to take a little levity in this process. I mean, the committee is not curing cancer, so I don't think that Scott Cupps having a little bit of fun is really going to kill anybody's vibe. You know what I mean? I also, Brad, helpfully today linked to a video that I posted to Instagram that features a little bit of color from that committee hearing, Brad.
So in other words, he had the actual bingo balls in there, and he would spin it. He'd pull out like B5, and then he had special bingo cards that were set up so that B5 was like a bill name or something like that. Yeah,
well, so it would be, and then you could look down at the sheet of paper, which I haven't seen the sheet of paper, but the representatives could say, okay, that whatever I would be, I-11 would be a bill on XYZ. Then they could go to their list and say, oh, okay, we're going to talk about this particular bill today.
So it wasn't really a card. It was like a list. So
I think if we want to split hairs, it might not have been a bingo card, Brad. I'm not sure. I didn't see it like I just said.
Well, interesting. So this guy sounds like my kind of guy.
And let me interrupt. I love the whole Bishop Davidson thing of like renaming the Katy Trail. Oh, wow. like I don't know, because you know that it's going to get people talking and it's going to break the monotony. And also, at a certain point, Jon Patterson, who's known for being diplomatic, at some point, Patterson texted Scott, and Scott would never get on the air, I don't think, and tell anybody this. But I'm sure Patterson reached out and was like, Scott, what's going on, man? Like, what do we need to talk about?
Well, but see, he breaks up the pattern that we all fall into. I mean, we all have a pattern in our life, a pattern in our job, what we do. And it's like my goofy thing where I always try to trick John, but he's too smart, where I do the thing. This was taught to me years ago by an advertising guy who is just an amazing man. You do the old thing. Hey, what does TOP spell? What does COP spell? What does HOP spell? What do you do when you come to a green light? Most people say stop, because you get into your brain gets into that essentially that pattern, and you can sort of lead people. But if you can break that pattern, people will remember that. And everybody will probably remember this dude and his bingo balls, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Brad. And here's the thing. I don't think anybody thinks that good legislation, I mean, when you read Hancock's piece here, it's clear that it's not like good legislation is coming through and that this committee will end up blocking something that won't eventually end up getting passed if it's a good enough bill.
So I wonder how initiative reform and the IP thing is doing. Is that still like
it was not assigned either BINGO or O, Brad. I think it's on a separate card. I think that's in the Keno game. That's a completely separate one.
I think it might be on the Ouija board as well. You never can tell, right? Okay.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of Satanists running around this place.
Number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
You could not escape the news this weekend. Missourians rising up against the terror that is Doge, against fascism, against modern-day white nationalism, and pain and hurt and anger. That's right. Hands-off rallies. That's the gimmick. That's the branding. Hands off. Hands off our Social Security. Hands off our libraries. All across the state of Missouri. Kansas City, Brad. St. Louis. Columbia. Even Washington, Missouri had some old folks come out in the rain looking like wet dogs with sad, drippy posters. You can go to my website yesterday on Sunday and see a mass collection of stories from around the state, people that have had enough. I saw that somewhere on Manchester Road, which isn't very specific, but somewhere on Manchester Road in St. Louis is where the St. Louis protesters were, standing out there in the rain. Brad, the people are furious. The stock market went down last week. People are hurting, and people aren't going to take it anymore. Go to my website, Brad. Read the collection of stories if you're so inclined. There's even a brand new protest song that I linked to. I put it up on my Instagram yesterday. Some of my favorite headlines are from KCUR. I should say not headlines, but photos. There's a heavyset woman yelling into a pink megaphone, and she's holding a sign that says, "Diversity is our strength." I think she forgot the letter R, Brad. Maybe Doge cuts have hurt. I'm guessing she looks like she'd probably be a public school employee. I'm guessing maybe budget cuts have hurt public schools so much that this woman can't spell diversity correctly.
She had it spelled wrong, huh?
And there's a gentleman who he had a sign in the same story that says, "This revolution will be televised." But he spelled televised wrong. I don't know. Maybe this shows, Brad, maybe folks should use, how the union folks have their prefab signs, the ones that they just hand out to the mouth breeders and they can just wave them. Those are going to be spelled correctly. Maybe these folks should just rely on pre-made signs.
Man, I tell you what, I don't understand it. We'll talk about it in B Block. There's a couple different things. Matter of fact, one of the things I saw this morning when I was doing my morning roundup of things that you and I could talk about is the complaint I've seen several times on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, that there's the complaint that, wow, everyone around the country was licking their wounds at seeing how their 401k has gone down. Donald Trump was on the golf course. Okay. Okay, whatever. Here we go again. Not everybody was licking their wounds, right, John? Were you licking?
Hey, Brad, Philip Morris was up 4% on Friday. If you don't own Philip Morris, I don't even know where we can begin that conversation.
Okay, number 1.
The number 1.
Missouri's own Eric Schmitt was with one of the most diligent and bulldog and persistent reporters, Mark Maxwell. KSDK's On the Record. Schmitt was asked questions about things as diverse as the cuts to the meteorological research. There might be weather balloons that have to be grounded because of Doge. Mark Maxwell also asked about tariffs. He shared some sad immigrant narratives of, people that are just minding their own business and then the Trump administration wants to send them away. So I know we're running close to time here, Brad, but Schmitt talked about the fact that, when you look at Doge cuts, Doge is trying to get government spending back down to pre-pandemic levels. So all the caterwauling about cuts to new weather balloons or meteorology funding is more than a little bit overblown. I thought it was nice that Schmitt gave a shout out to KSDK's weather department. He said he grew up watching KSDK weather, even and including the great Bob Richards. I thought that was a nice shout out from Senator Schmitt, but also talked about the fact that we've seen in the short term, companies decide to bring their manufacturing back to the United States, whether it's Apple, Honda, NVIDIA, other companies deciding, hey, looks like we're going to have to start making stuff here in the United States. Schmitt also touched on topics like NAFTA, talked about M13, also talked about the fact Maxwell used his last question, or at least the last question in this particular edit, to talk about Democrats complaining about Republicans wanting to change a parliamentary procedure to push through these tax cuts. And Schmitt actually went through the background of the parliamentary rule and why it doesn't even apply here and why it's completely irrelevant here. I have a link with timestamps. It's the top headline on my website today, Brad.
John, in segment B, in B block, it's something that dovetails exactly what you just talked about. A very fascinating interview that I heard over the weekend on KWMU about the lady who held an interesting position back in the Clinton administration. And I found it absolutely positively fascinating because there are so many parallels what's going on with Trump. And first off, the Clinton administration was Democrat with Bill and Al Gore. We now have a Republican, and they're doing the same thing, and that's what the story was about. And it was actually sort of fascinating. So let's hit that off.
Yeah, let's start with that. I'm unfamiliar with that story.
Oh, it's very fascinating. It was, and this was the lady who ran. It was called. As a matter of fact, it's interesting because Mike Otten, who's a good guy, used to work for me, still does some work for me at the radio station. Great guy. And now, since we have our improved signal, and once again, John, you don't believe it's improved, he now listens to us, whereas before he could not.
Wow, nice info, dude. Go ahead.
Yes, info dude. Yes, info dude. He sent me this link several weeks back, and I forgot to mention it, which is Doge is nothing new. Matter of fact, it's interesting because there was a department, and they actually renamed the department. But this thing goes back to the Clinton administration, and it was fascinating, and we will talk about that when we come up with the next break. Okay?